Good morning, everyone. Betty McIntyre here with your bi-weekly Cup of Capital. Good morning, Becca.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I got my coffee, but look
Me
at
too.
yesterday was the kindness day, so I thought I would change my mug up so we can let everyone know that everyone rocks.
Yes, that's wonderful. I love it. All right. Well, sounds like it's been a busy week for you at the Capitol. Well, for everyone at the Capitol. So I think we should just dive in and maybe you can talk a little bit about what's been going on this week and we can ask some questions to follow up.
All right. Well, yeah, it's definitely been a very busy week down at the Capitol this week. And that's because this was the last week for bills to be heard in their original chamber. So there's some, the session has deadlines, and this was a big deadline week. And so long agendas, long committee hearings, and it was just from sun up to sundown every day this week.
Wow. I can only imagine. Do you mind talking a little bit about the deadlines for the bills and how that works, if you could clarify? And then, well, yeah, I'll just let you do that first.
Okay, sure. So the legislative session in Arizona is established through the Constitution and the Arizona Constitution, and there's rules and deadlines throughout the session. So it's based off of the 100-day session, meaning that the legislature should only be in session for max of 100 days. We know that's not how it works, but for the purposes of the calendar, they start at that 100-day and then they set deadlines to keep the process moving. And in February is the first major deadline of when all bills are introduced. And if they're going to move through the process, they have to be heard in their original chamber. So let me give an example. So all House bills that were introduced, if they're going to continue to move through their life of a bill journey, they have to be heard in all of the committees they were assigned to in the House by today. And it's the same in the Senate. All the Senate bills that are going to continue to move through, in order for them to move, had to have been heard in their committees by today. Because today is technically the deadline. But there's one exception, and that's appropriations.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about why the Appropriations Committee is unique and why they can go past that first deadline?
I will do my best to explain. Right? So in the rules that, everyone has to follow, the rules allow for appropriations to go a week after all the other standing committees. And that's mostly because appropriations has to do with funding. So the Appropriations Committee handles all of the funding bills. And so I just kind of think of it as an opportunity to be fair. So giving any funding bill to go through any other committee, for example, finance or education. And then if it has any kind of dollars attached to it, it has to go through one of those committees first. And then it goes to appropriations. So I think it's just about giving opportunity for that bill to really move through without, dying.
Ah, I see. That makes more sense. Okay. I'm still learning about the whole process and how it all works with bills and committees. I know that you also mentioned something about how the agendas have been full all day and it's been very busy. So that brings up another question. It seems like some committees were able to hold meetings twice. So could you talk a little bit about that concept and why it happens?
Yes, you're correct. Some committees this year we're seeing, a committee, if they were not able to get through their full agenda, can ask the Speaker in the House or ask the Senate President to waive the rules and allow them to have 2 meetings in this last week so they can get through all the bills that they want to get through that is on their agenda. So this year, we saw Senate government. Oh my God, Senate government met twice last week, twice this week. I mean, so they've met double more than any other committee. And Senate Health and Human Services, they're also meeting twice. So it just was like, whoa, there's so many committees, particularly in the Senate, where they're meeting twice. In the House, not so much, but what the House did is they went from morning all the way through the night until they got through all of their bills.
I see. So when you mention that, I think that that's called double committees. Is that the term?
I don't know if that's the technical term. That's the term I use because I think it's pretty explanatory. So I'm like, double committee assignment. But that's not necessarily a technical term. That's a Betty term.
I see. No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I'm following the concept accurately. So, okay, that's your term. So I appreciate the clarification on what that all means in the process. Now, while we're here talking about bills, I know that you did want to talk a little bit generally about some of the bills that have passed and those that have failed. Do you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah. So some of the bills that we've been monitoring did not make it to either any committee agendas or they did not make it on a second committee agenda. And so those bills theoretically are considered dead. But we know that nothing is ever really dead until the last day of session, because you remember zombie bills, right? Zombie bills can come back at any time. So some of the things that we saw is the ADA state coordinator bill. That's a bill that Representative Longden has been introducing for the last 3-4 years. It was assigned to Health and Human Services in the House and also House Appropriations. It was withdrawn from the House Health and Human Services and then was just going to go to Appropriations. But I looked at the calendar agenda for Appropriations on that bill, and I did not see it on the calendar for next week. So that would make me think that that bill is not going to move. There's another bill that we're monitoring, and we're really hoping it does come back to life in some way, and that's the ASDB voucher bill 2566 bill. That was dual assigned to Education and Appropriations. It passed out of Education on a unanimous vote, but it failed to get on the Appropriations agenda. So that bill could be dead, but I'm hopeful that that bill will find a new way to live, because I think it's really important for ASDB. So those are a couple of bills that we've been monitoring that we're like, ugh. And then some of the other bills that we thought were dead, we weren't tracking them, but it's just kind of more of like an FYI for the, is there were 2 bills that actually failed in committee. Just bills we weren't tracking. One was related to transgendered youth, and another one was related to an education bill related to something related to education. And one was in the Senate and one was in the House. And both of those bills failed out of committee. And so we were like, okay, that bill failed, they're dead. But each one of those bills actually came back to life in a new format and passed the second time. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? I've never seen this before. And I've been down at the Capitol for a really long time. And I've seen bills, die on the floor and get motioned for reconsideration and revoted, but I've never seen that in committee. So that was something I found really interesting this past week. I was like, wait, what's going on? I didn't think that was allowed. But then we go back to the rules. There's always some gray room. There's always that wiggle room that allows for anything to come back to life. And that's why we always say, nothing's ever dead until signee die.
Wow. I mean, that definitely keeps us on our toes and keeps us watching, because if things are never really dead until signee die, then you really got to keep your eyes on it and pay attention to all the moving parts throughout the process. Wow, that's really crazy.
That's why I'm always so busy, because I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah. Okay, I know that we have talked about another bill that was mentioned, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the bill related to fireworks and the overnight prohibition.
Oh, yeah. So the firework bill, there was a bill that was passed
Yeah.
out of committee and passed out of the House that would prohibit the launching of those fireworks in the overnight hours. So during the holidays, ever since fireworks have passed, and it just seems like it's gotten more intense over the last couple of years, where fireworks are going off into 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and it sounds like a war zone. I know personally in my neighborhood, it's intense. It's like you can't sleep. My dogs go nuts. We have a vet that lives next door to us, and like it's just the most obnoxious sound because you just hear fireworks going off all night. Well, this bill passed the House, and it's going to move over to the Senate now, that would prohibit anyone from launching fireworks after, I think, like midnight or something, like 1 or midnight or something like that. So.
Oh, I was curious about that one, because, we talk about the term deaf gain, and as a deaf person, fireworks don't bother me like they bother people that are not deaf. But I haven't thought, about people that are hard of hearing, who have continuing hearing loss, and how it might impact that population.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a good time to bring up hearing preservation and not being exposed to too many loud noises, especially in the midnight hours. It's kind of like how we do our annual noisy toys statement with keeping an eye and monitoring hearing for children, especially for children with some of the loud toys. And the same can be true with fireworks. If fireworks are going well into the evening hours, I can imagine that would be impactful. I know my husband is a part of the next door neighborhood group that neighborhoods have, and many have expressed concerns with fireworks. So my husband and I didn't realize it was an issue until our neighborhood started talking about it, but it is an issue in the community.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And yeah, you're right. It's definitely deaf game that you don't have to hear them going off all night. But I think that's a very good point around hearing healthcare, and making sure we're preserving our hearing. Not just the nuisance of fireworks going off all night long, and then the impacts that it has on our pets and the impacts it has on our veterans community, and their PTSD, but also the hearing preservation, because
Right.
fireworks are loud,
Hmm.
I mean, loud. So I think that's a really good point to bring up to our viewers. So support that bill, folks. I,
What was the last thing you said? Okay. All right. I'd like to jump into a couple other bills in voting. HB 2602, and there was one bill that was related to early education or early voting, and one was related to voting for older age groups. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about those bills and how they impact our communities.
Most definitely. So let's talk about Senate Bill 1404 first. That bill is, I mentioned it in the legislative alert last week a little bit. What that bill is trying to do is limit who is eligible to receive an early ballot. And there's only a few categories of individuals who would be eligible to receive an early ballot. You have to be, you have to have like a physical disability. You have to be blind, or you have to be 65 years of age, or you live 15 miles away from your precinct voting place. So if folks recall, way back when, Arizona used to only, you went and voted at your precinct. And that was like 20 years ago, right? You would go to a specific polling place and you would vote, and you were only allowed to request your early ballot if you were sick or had an emergency. And then in the last 20, 30 years, we opened that up to allow anybody to request an early ballot. And it's worked wonders. We have one of the most efficient mail-in voting systems in the country. But because of the concerns from certain members in the legislature, they are putting forth some of these bills that restrict who can have an early ballot. And one of those bills is 1404. We are monitoring that bill because we feel that it's important that all individuals, particularly our deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind communities, have the ability to vote early. And we've talked about this previously, right, Becca, about early voting is less frustrating for our communities. Going to any polling location, whether it's a vote center or a precinct, it's challenging, and it's not really like the ADA requirements, right, that they're allowed, the elections have to go through. Outside of you bringing someone to help you complete your ballot under the ADA, it's just difficult, right? Like to get an interpreter to come with you if you needed one. I mean, there's just so much more commotion that's going on. And we just don't think that's fair. We just don't feel like that's right. So we're monitoring that bill. If that bill moves through the Senate, we definitely will be reaching out to the community and put out a call to action about that, how that bill needs to not move forward, because it has a direct impact on our community and their right to vote from their home. And then Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, did you have a follow-up question on that one?
Well, I was just thinking the same thing. I mean, every citizen has the right to vote. So it feels very restricting
Mhm.
on a person's ability to cast a vote. So that was surprising to me.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, I think it's just this shift in how people are viewing elections right now. And some people feel that there's fraud in mail-in voting. And then there's folks who feel like the system's working just fine. I will say, though, there was a very interesting debate in Senate government this week. There's a bill actually that allows for early ballots, braille ballots, large print ballots to be mailed to voters who are blind or visually impaired. And the debate, I mean, the bill passed, but the debate was very interesting because there was members in the committee who felt that by providing a braille mail-in ballot, that folks were going to go learn braille so then they could fraudulently fill out that ballot. They thought, well, here's this, this provides another opportunity for fraud. And I'm thinking to myself, as we know, our deafblind community, that here's this bill that may create better access for them and their right to vote from the comfort of their home. And folks are thinking, legitimately have concerns that someone's going to learn braille so then they could misuse that vote. And so it's very interesting to kind of watch and hear folks debate some of these bills, because from our perspective, we're like, well, first of all, braille's hard to learn, right? It's not easy. It is not easy to learn braille.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so while we can sit back and think and go, that's crazy, like, why would someone think that? But it goes back to education and this concern of fraud and not really understanding what this bill really would do and the impacts it would have on individuals who are blind and their access to the ballot. So that's something that I found very interesting, just watching and listening this week. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for the explanation about 1404. Do you mind talking a little bit about 2602? I think that it was something related to emergency voting.
Yes, 2602, which is a House bill. It's being sponsored by Representative Bullock. She, just for full transparency, she's actually running to be Secretary of State who oversees all elections in the state of Arizona. Representative Bullock has sponsored a bill that would eliminate all emergency voting and all early vote centers. So it goes back to the only way you could go and vote is at a polling place on election day. So that one day out of the year, that's where you go and vote.
Huh. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll keep an eye on that one and see what happens with it.
Yeah, very much
That
so.
is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I don't know who's watching in the audience today, and I'm not sure if they know that we always offer up some questions related to the government and what's happening with the legislature, that an email can be sent to info@acdhh.az.gov. And in the subject line, you can include, I want to know. So we actually received a few emails of people who want to know. So I'd like to ask Betty a few more questions about those emails. The first one is about how this is called the 55th legislative session, second regular session. And the person wanted to know why it's not called the 56th. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I thought that was a really good question from the community, and I put it in our "You Want to Know" section this last Friday. So in Arizona, our state Senate, and our state House of Representatives are elected on 2-year terms. And so when we think about the legislature, it's based around that 2-year period. So you have the 55th first regular session, which is the first year of their term, and the 55th second regular session is their second year of their first term. So that's why we're in the 55th second regular session, because this is the second year of their term. And then this year is an election year. So then next year will be the 56th first regular session.
Okay, now that makes sense. So it's going in 2-year increments, essentially, to go by the terms, and then the first and second year in those terms. Great. So I expect that next year will be the 56th and begin the first of the 2-year term. Again, thank you for clarifying, Betty. Another question we received was someone wanting an update of Senate Bill 1092. Could you talk a little bit about Senate Bill 1092, please?
Sure. So Senate Bill 1092 was actually from last year, from the 55th first regular session. And that was a commission sponsored bill that added the duties of our office having the ability to make legislative recommendations related to language acquisition and literacy readiness for deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind infants and children. And so one of the things that we did from that bill, since it was signed by the governor, is we created a task force. And we feel like it's best, before we put forth any recommendations, that we do our homework and we bring in the folks who are professionals in language acquisition for deaf and hard of hearing, bring in schools, bring in community members. So we actually just started this task force this month in February. And what that task force, if folks are interested in watching, will be streamed via this YouTube channel. So I want folks to know that even if they're not participating on the task force, there still is an opportunity for them to participate via YouTube and watch. And then I do also believe that there's going to be some subcommittees that if anyone who is interested and also qualified in their experience can participate in those subcommittees as well. So we'll definitely make sure that we include some of that information on our website related to the task force meetings and where folks can watch.
Great, thank you, Betty. That leads to the last question from our community. Let me just look at my notes quickly. One person mentioned that they couldn't understand why ACDHH didn't sit on the proposed Alzheimer's and Dementia Advisory Committee. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so we requested, there's a bill, 1199, that Senator Gray was sponsoring with several co-sponsors, including Senator Alston, who works very hard on our issues related to the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind communities, where this bill would create an advisory council for Alzheimer's and dementia. And the purpose of this advisory council was to create the state plan on how to respond and provide resources and education related to Alzheimer's or dementia. We requested for an amendment to be included as part of that advisory council. And the reason why, and I think this was the question that folks were asking, is because hearing loss is a huge impact factor. It's a huge factor in Alzheimer's and dementia. So I think we talked about it at our last Capo Capital, that if an individual has moderate hearing loss, that they are 2 times more likely to experience Alzheimer's. And if they're profoundly deaf, then 5 times more likely. So it is it's a factor. And so we felt that it's extremely important to, with that kind of statistics, that the commission be on the advisory council, because it's our community that's going to be impacted. And so it would be remiss for the commission to not be represented on that advisory council. The second part of the reason why we were asking to be included was based off of the survey that we just did this past winter to community members who are 55 years of age and older. And the number one issue that the community came back with was their concern around education, information, resources, and care related to Alzheimer's and dementia. So because the commission firmly believes, and being the voice of our community, when we saw that result, here was this opportunity for us to be present and help with what the community is asking for. So we did ask for that amendment. However, that bill was not assigned to an agenda. So that bill is not moving forward at this time.
Oh.
Yeah.
I
know.
Well, that's too bad.
Next year.
That's right. And we can always continue to look for opportunities where ACDHH can have a seat at the table, particularly at that level. So yeah, like you said, Betty, we're not going to give up. We'll just keep after it year after year and continue our requests to be involved. Nothing about us without us. That's our famous motto for our community and various communities. While decisions are being made that impact those communities, they definitely want to make sure that our input is involved. So I appreciate your clarification on that one, Betty. And I actually think that that's all for the I want to know questions. Are there any final words that you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I think that that was a really great discussion we had today, and I'm excited for more I want to know questions. So please send us your email on things that you want to know.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, and you all have a great day.
And remember, you rock.